Hey folks, we're about to start another episode of Ask Us Anything about electrochemistry. But before we begin, because we have some extra time, there are a few things I'd like to go over first. While we're waiting for the live stream to start, type your question into the chat. The sooner we get your question, the sooner we'll be able to answer it when the live stream starts. We usually try to answer questions in the order that we receive them, but it's definitely possible that we get so many questions that when your question comes up, we're out of time. If you are a Tier 1 or a Tier 2 YouTube member, you do get priority in us answering your question. You also have the opportunity to join us on the stream to either share slides or talk to us in person about your specific electrochemistry research questions. If you are a Tier 1 or Tier 2 member on our YouTube channel, you will find in the community post the link and password to join us on our broadcasting platform. We get a lot of questions about electrochemistry, whether it's through our YouTube comments, webinars, email, phone conversations. We get lots of questions from people about electrochemistry. And sometimes responding to a YouTube comment or trying to describe a cyclic voltammogram over the phone isn't always the easiest way to teach or describe electrochemistry. That's why we created this live stream. In the Ask Us Anything About Electrochemistry live stream, you can ask us any questions you have about electrochemistry, and we can use better tools and take more time to describe some of these electrochemical processes to help you with your research and understanding of electrochemistry. Now, in our time of doing this live stream, we've observed that if you ask a very, very specific question, we might not be able to answer it. It'll be a little bit too specific for us. On the other side, if you ask a very broad question and you're interested in just a very broad understanding of cyclic voltammetry, we have separate tools, we have other resources to help you. So we do have a YouTube video on cyclic voltammetry, an introduction to the subject. And if you're interested in more of a long-form course on, say, electrochemical impedance spectroscopy, we have a 5-part EIS webinar series for our Tier 2 YouTube members that you can access at any time. Now, if you weren't aware, Pine Research Instrumentation is a company that produces a wide array of high-quality electrochemical research equipment, from potentiostats to electrodes, electrochemical rotators, cells, different types of accessories. Pine Research has been supporting electrochemistry research and teaching for decades. Recently, we have developed new electrochemical simulation software called Aftermath Live. Aftermath Live is an online streaming platform where you can simulate popular electrochemical techniques like cyclic voltammetry. It's a powerful research tool, as you might simulate a cyclic voltammogram to support an electrochemical mechanism for your redox reaction that you're studying. But Aftermath Live and cyclic voltammetry simulation is also a very powerful tool when it comes to just learning electrochemistry. In fact, in previous episodes of the live stream, we have used Aftermath Live and our simulation software to answer some of the questions that you have. If you are watching this on YouTube, you can get a 10% discount on your first month of the basic and research editions of Aftermath Live by using the coupon code PINEYouTube10 when you're at checkout. Aftermath Live is a powerful tool and you can cancel your subscription at any time. Go to aftermathlive.com to check it out. Link is in the description below. Our live streams are normally on Fridays from 1 to 3 p.m. They normally last about 2 hours, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. If you miss the live stream, you'll always be able to watch it on our YouTube channel, and in the description we put timestamps for every question that was asked. This way you can look through the description and find the questions that are most relevant to your research and then watch those at your leisure. Also, we apologize in advance if we mispronounce your name. If on the YouTube channel you can put anything you want as a name. It could be a Pokemon, it could be a string of numbers. But if we call you out and we accidentally mispronounce your name, we apologize in advance. Lastly, please do not spam the chat. We've had numerous instances of people either talking about inappropriate things or constantly filling the chat up with some kind of spam. We will remove you if you do that. Let's keep the chat very clean and just talk about electrochemistry. Sometimes it takes a while before we're able to answer your question. So if you keep typing your question into the chat and spam the chat, then we will remove you from the chat. But if it's been a while and we may have forgotten about your question, one message as a gentle reminder is all that's required. All right, I think that's all of the housekeeping things. Now, let's start the live stream. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Ask Us Anything About Electrochemistry. That was our new, our latest introduction to the live stream. So as you all know, this is a live stream where you can ask us any questions that you have about electrochemistry. Unfortunately, my colleague, Dr. Neil Spinner, is out. He had some kind of health issues and is unable to make it today. But as the intro says, you should ask or type any questions that you have during the live stream, and we'll be able to answer it, or I'll be able to answer it as needed. Okay, so again, type your questions in, and eventually we'll get to them, or I'll try to get to them in the chat, either on YouTube or on LinkedIn, which is the other platform that we are streaming on. All right, so there was a question from YouTube earlier, as we wait for some questions to come in, that I do want to at least talk a little bit about. So Vindazja Kanap 7726 made a comment on one of our YouTube videos about reference electrode shunts, which is primarily used in EIS. When you start measurement, you set the reference electrode potential according to the kind of electrode you use. What would you set there now, since it changes from platinum to the other during the measurement? And this is, of course, respect to the reference electrode shunt. So Vidaz Janab, hopefully, I think my colleague Neil may have responded to you, but also I'm hoping to talk about or try to address this question now in the during this live stream, or at least something to discuss or talk about. So let me share. Again, my colleague Neil is out, so I'm not able to perhaps move as quickly when it comes to doing things, or so please bear with me. But of course, we really appreciate everybody who comes in. So let me just check to make sure people can see. All right. So what we were talking about earlier was the following. You have a 3-electrode cell. You have your working electrode. Let's just call the working electrode this. You have your reference electrode. Well, actually, let's actually focus solely on the reference electrode in this case. This might just make it a little bit easier. So this is specifically with respect to a shunt, the question. And a shunt, for those who are curious, is if you have your reference electrode lead here, it goes into 2 directions. It actually breaks off, and part of the lead is your kind of silver chloride. Let's say this is an aqueous system. You have your typical glass tube, and you have your reference electrode frit. That's here. Okay. And so this is something like silver chloride, Ag, Cl. But we also have a capacitor and a platinum wire, which I'll draw kind of as a counter electrode, but it's not really a counter electrode. It doesn't have to be very long, but it's platinum, so we'll use PT to describe it. Okay. And this could be, say, maybe 1 microfarad, maybe 1 nanofarad. And this is a type of reference electrode, or shunt per se, that you would add to your electrochemical system. Okay. And let me just make sure that there's no questions in chat. I just want to make sure there's some semblance of attendance that people are watching. Okay. All right. I didn't miss anything. Again, type your questions in. Also, I'm having a hard candy right now because Neil was out. I had to do a lot of work, physical labor, to try to work on what Neil was working on so that we reached a certain deadline. And it was just very labor intensive. So I'm using some sugar to get me through this. So this is the reference electrode shunt. And so normally we understand very clearly, most of the time, that when I use a silver chloride reference electrode, I'm applying the potential between my working, which let me just draw it as this. This is my working electrode. Working. When we're doing any experiments, we are plotting the potential of the working electrode versus AgAgCl. That's what we apply. And when you're doing something like EIS, it's very normal to say, oh, when we apply a sinusoidal potential, the potential is sinusoidal with respect to silver chloride. And silver chloride is a well-behaved system, relatively speaking, especially on the time scale of these. The reason why people implement a shunt is because they'll run into artifacts in the high frequency region when doing EIS. But the question is, what potential are you really versus when you're doing EIS in these high frequencies? Is it this? Is it the shunt? Is it the platinum wire connected to a capacitor? Which then goes to your potentiostat, or is it the silver chloride? And what happens in EIS is, let's say this is kind of your Nyquist plot. We're going from high frequency all the way to low frequency. So this is Z real. This is negative Z imaginary. So in the high frequency region, this is where we see artifacts that the shunt is supposed to remove, right? So by having or implementing the shunt, you actually have this. It actually corrects it. So while it isn't very well known or understood, my understanding about, specifically to his question, at what potential does is this shunt at? The potential is probably going to be of the platinum wire in whatever solution. And so whatever redox species is governed in this, around the platinum wire, whatever is here, I know you may have, some ions, some things, whatever that platinum wire feels is the potential. In a way, it's our general understanding of potential, kind of conceptually. Like if we put two reference electrodes, for example, like if we take two reference electrodes and we put them in solution, and then we measure the open circuit potential between those two reference electrodes, we would determine what the potential difference is between them. And it would be whatever you see in the literature. For example, silver chloride is shifted plus 0.197 volts versus the standard hydrogen electrode. And if I put these two electrodes into the solution, I either put a multimeter or a potentiostat and measure the open circuit potential, I would get 197 millivolts, right? So 0.197 millivolts, what I would see in a table. And so similarly, instead of having that silver chloride as the potential, you have that platinum wire with whatever redox species is the fastest governing what that potential is. And in most cases, it's an unknown. And so going back to the question, and you start the measurement, you set the potential according to the kind of electrodes that you use. And to a certain degree, I would say it's not just the start, it's always throughout the experiment. It's the reference electrode, unless you set the open circuit potential as the potential you want to make measurements with respect to. And so now that you've changed it to platinum, what actually happens? And you now just have that platinum electrode. Only in the high frequency region of EIS is the potential with respect to. That's kind of how I see it. It eventually goes back to silver chloride. Eventually, you go back to silver chloride once you move to the lower frequency EIS experiments. Sorry, I'm really just enjoying this hard candy. But it eventually goes from high frequency to low frequency as you move along this way. And the shunt, this part, only applies for that high frequency region. It's really only meant to deal with high frequency noise, but occasionally you do get some issues that may arise. And one thing to think about or consider is that the impedance of a capacitor, the impedance of a capacitor is like 1 over j omega c, something along those lines. There's an inverse relationship. So the higher the frequency, the lower the resistance, but it's also over the C value as well. So as the capacitance gets smaller and smaller, I believe, and let me actually double check so that I don't know, so I make sure I know what I'm talking about. Impedance of a capacitor. Yeah, 1 over the frequency times C. So as the capacitance gets smaller, the impedance increases. Yes. So what ends up happening from this, at least what we understand with the shunt video, is you pick these kind of higher capacitances, sort of say, so that it has a lower impedance, so that this becomes the pathway in the high frequency region. Here, I had a long conversation with Neil about, because I was talking about this and trying to figure out why do these shunts work? And really it's because there's actually capacitance around the glass of the silver chloride reference electrode. All right. So there's glass around it, and that glass actually acts like a capacitor because there's charge that builds up on the outside of the glass and on the inside of the glass. So you have ions on both sides, and they actually, in a way, store charge. With the dielectric of glass and the thickness of glass, you end up getting something like 8 picofarads of capacitance. And that ends up meaning this becomes, actually can create some problems. The capacitance here actually can cause some problems. So because it's a low capacitance, it ends up having a higher impedance. So if you didn't have this shunt and the high frequency regime, the impedance actually goes through the capacitor as opposed to going through the frit resistance, which is what is normally the case when you have a silver chloride reference electrode. So, and when you have the silver chloride reference electrode, that is the potential, that's the reference electrode that you apply a potential with respect to. And in the high frequency region, sort of say, the frit impedance is not the lowest. The lowest becomes the capacitance here, and so the shunt is usually implemented as a way to kind of offset or remove some of that high impedance pathway, sort of say. That may be a little bit confusing, but hopefully this kind of at least answers the initial question, which is what potential are you selecting? And it's only for a few data points in the high frequency region where this where the shunt, the platinum wire, becomes the path of least resistance, mostly because you have a microfarad or nanofarad capacitor, which has a lower impedance than the silver chloride at high frequencies. And whatever the platinum is feeling, kind of based on the Nernst equation, whatever has a fast electron transfer reaction with the platinum in your solution will be the potential with which you are applying that sine wave to when you're doing your experiments, your EIS or your CV or something like that. So hopefully that's helpful. I hope that answers the question. Things like that. Okay, so let me look at. Looks like we have some questions. So Go Cool is here. He says, "Hi Neil. So Neil. Unfortunately, is not feeling very well, but I'll extend a hello to Neil when he's getting better." Go Cool asks a question. He asks, "Getting lesser peak potential in CV than bare GCE, but lesser RCT value than bare GCE in a ferri ferrocyanide solution. Is this possible or something happened wrong? I meant peak current, not peak." He said, "I meant peak current, not peak potential." Okay, so let me make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So when you say GCE, I'm assuming, Go Cool, you're referring to a glassy carbon electrode, right? But what I don't understand, so less kind of peak current in the cyclic voltammogram with a bare, so nothing GCE value, peak current than bare, but less charge transfer resistance than bare in a ferri ferrocyanide solution. Oh, so is it possible to have less current but a lower RCT value for, again, kind of the same glassy carbon electrode? Generally speaking, I would probably say no, because when you get, well, okay. There are a couple things that could be happening. So one thing to keep in mind is that in a traditional cyclic voltammetry experiment with a glassy carbon electrode, you have a ferri ferrocyanide solution, your current is mass transport limited. So it's not just purely kinetics, which the RCT value, the charge transfer resistance, is in a way a purely kinetic parameter, if you think about it. The current only has to do with the resistance of the molecule, being able to undergo an electron transfer between the working electrode and the electrolyte solution, right? That, like, undergoing an electron transfer that way. So I'm just trying to think about, so if you don't have, if diffusion, for example, is a problem, you could have certainly quite a bit less, like if your diffusion coefficient is super low, if it moves very slowly, you can have less current, but the electron transfer, the charge transfer resistance associated with electron transfer can be a little bit different. So now, granted, I would also say, with that being said, generally speaking, if you have low current, you should not have a small RCT. The charge transfer resistance for these types of things is a function of the potential, right? So as the potential changes, your charge transfer resistance goes higher or lower. And we kind of know that in a way. I would bet that if you did EIS at a potential kind of beyond the redox potential of your ferri ferrocyanide solution, your charge transfer resistance would be very, very low, but your current would also maybe not be very high. In fact, your current decays over time, again, due to diffusion, due to mass transport. So I would say that's kind of what I might think is happening. The charge transfer resistance is not necessarily low, or not necessarily high. The charge transfer resistance is low. It's easy for the electron transfer to occur. But the ability to do the charge transfer, because the molecules just aren't in solution near the electrode surface, that, in my opinion, can be impeded. So let me show you something. Let's go back to this. Let me delete all this for a minute. Make sure that I'm showing. So if I have a CV, just a regular cyclovoltammogram, I can't draw CVs super well. This is I can draw them a little bit better. I'm gonna draw them just a little bit better. UPS. Okay. All right, guys, hold on 1 second. We need to take a short break. I will get to your question in just a minute. I'm sorry, someone just arrived. I need to make sure that some equipment ships out. But in the meantime, I'm going to have one of my chronoamperometry videos playing because, unfortunately, I have to take care of this thing. Again, this has to do with Neil kind of being a little bit out of the office, and so watch this quick thing. 4, 3, 2, 1. Just Hey folks, in this video we're going to talk about chronoamperometry, specifically what it is and how the technique is used. This video is broken up into several sections. First, we'll talk about what is chronoamperometry, what is the potentiostat doing to our electrochemical system and the response that it gives. We'll then talk about that response, what electrochemical processes give us that response, and the mathematical theory behind it. We'll finish off by talking about some of the technical issues that you might want to consider when doing chronoamperometry. All right, sorry about that. Just to kind of, all right, so I'm back. I apologize for that little hiccup. Again, Neil and I, we had to ship a lot of equipment out to the for the ECS Prime meeting that's in Hawaii next month in October. If you are at the ECS Prime meeting, you should stop by the Pine Research booth and say hi to Neil and Tim while they're there. But we need to ship equipment out, and so UPS just came. And Neil is out. I'm kind of the only person here working on stuff. So just want to finish up this one thought. You have voltage, you have current. Okay, so if I'm right here, okay, this is my redox species. My RCT is very high. So RCT, R is high. Okay. And I have low current. When I'm at this potential right here, or something like that, RCT is low. I'm able to get electron transfer to happen. So this is low. Okay. But if I'm here, RCT is also still, it's lower, I would say. You should see a even lower charge transfer resistance. I have more potential, so it's more, and of course my voltammogram starts here. I'm going this direction. I'm oxidizing something and I'm reducing it on the way back. So here I have a low current, but a low RCT, right? Which is strange. You wouldn't normally expect that. But when we think about CV, when we think about stuff on a bare glassy carbon electrode, we're mass transport limited in this region, which is why RCT is low, but my current is also low. When in normal, you would expect something more like this. This is kind of what we normally think. RCT is low, but my current is high. My current is all the way here. This is what we normally expect, but this can happen in the sense when mass transport is the limiting factor. So hopefully that is helpful. Hopefully that's helpful. Go cool. And do let me know if you have any questions about that. Okay. It doesn't look like there are any questions right now, but again, please type your questions in, and I'll try to get to them as soon as possible. I think maybe, I don't know if the school year is super busy or something along those lines. One thing that I wanted to talk about somewhat briefly was on the last live stream, we had Shruti asked us a question, and unfortunately I don't have the question on me right now, but Shruti was asking in a general sense about, I'm going to kind of zoom in here. Give me 1 second. So let me share this window. Okay, so this was a paper that Shruti published. She wanted to know about this equation right here. So this equation was used to calculate the specific capacitance of basically this special this kind of zinc, I think zirconium material that she made, and she's looking for the specific capacity. So she puts this thing on an electrode and does a variety of different electrochemistry experiments. And she gets a lot of different types of voltammograms, but she's using this equation. She wanted to know whether or not this equation holds for calculating the capacitance. Now I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to kind of go back up. But these are some of the voltammograms. She takes. She gets these voltammograms. She puts these in 6 molar sodium hydroxide solution, and this is a scan rate study. All these voltammograms are just at different scan rates. Of course, the higher current ones give us more. The higher current, the higher scan rate gives us more current, which is what we would normally expect. And in here, she's just kind of showing, when you have slow scan rates, you don't get as much current. When you have fast scan rates, you have more current. She also does a couple things to say, look at what is the capacitance. So you can imagine but she calculates a variety of different specific capacitances depending on the scan rate. And I don't exactly, it's been a little bit of time since I looked at this, but for example, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. So she has these values of the capacitance at all these different, these are different loadings, sort of say. This is amp per gram. But she does this also for scan rates. I'm trying to say, look at exactly where she's measuring different. Okay, this is like, again, this is farads per gram, another specific capacitance for the material, different levels of it. And even earlier on, I think she measures different capacitances. I can't find it right now. Let's see. No, not in cyclic voltammetry. But I think it was, yeah. So this was another kind of, let's see. Yeah, here we go. Here we go. So this was right here, this plot, and make sure people want to talk about it. So in this plot, in this figure 6, D, for example, here in this area, the specific capacitance in farads per gram is decreasing as you increase the scan rate. So I have, this is just kind of my opinion, and she's using the Dunn model of, which also I have, I guess, some kind of questions on, but she's using the Dunn model to look at the diffusion or Faradaic response versus the capacitive response, with which there is certain levels of confusion that I have about it, and part of it may be because I haven't used the Dunn model. I grew up using, this textbook here. I grew up using this textbook, Bard and Faulkner, and to my knowledge, I'll actually just take a quick look. I don't know if the Dunn model is even referenced at all. So for me, this is kind of new, but I'm just going to take a quick look here. I could be wrong, but the Dunn model, I don't think is mentioned or referenced in any of the electrochemical methods, fundamentals, and applications books. Not to say that it's bad. I think in principle the Dunn model actually works very well in the sense of being able to look at the difference between diffusive and capacitive current, that you want to take cyclovoltammograms in the absence of your analyte, and then you want to do another cyclovoltammogram in the presence of the analyte. And so in the paper, in the publication that was sent, it was not clear to me what the Faradaic process was. It was a cobalt redox process, but was that an added cobalt, or was that cobalt that was inherent in the material, right? And so if the cobalt was inherent in the material, how are you able to actually take voltammograms with and without the the capacitive and the diffusive? How could you separate those two out? And I'm not trying to attack the author. I'm just trying to think a little bit, or even think critically, or just show kind of a different thing about what might be happening. But I would say that the nature of capacitance, right? When I think about capacitance should not, her original question, and again, specific capacitance decreases with current density, or and then there's an IR drop, which is fine. But and this is kind of a little bit of the question that Neil proposed last time, was about using this kind of equation in a non-linear sense. And I just want to say that I think it's important to recognize what is and what isn't a capacitive versus diffusive contribution. It's hard for me to look at some of these things and say oh, here, this is capacitive contribution or something. I'm like, well, capacitance really, like this doesn't hit me as diffusive contribution. It's normally capacitive, even though these are designed to have superconducting, not super capacitive properties. It's hard to tell. So, but the general understanding, or the way that I like to kind of think about this is, if we go here, and we talked about this a little bit last week, but it's worth going over and sharing, is the current associated with a capacitor. And so this is my capacitor. The current is equal to the capacitance of the capacitor. It could be 1 microfarad. It could be 1 nanofarad. Oops, I don't want to make my ones and units to be. Let's just do 5 nanofarads, or 1 millifarad. We have all these different capacitances. Those are these values here, times dV dt, and that shows up in the equation that actually she showed earlier. And if you plot this, if you did a cyclic voltammogram of just the capacitor, you would get a box. You would just get a box. And so you'd have current, you'd have voltage, and you'd get a box at one scan rate. But if I go from like 10 millivolts per second to 100 millivolts per second, then I'm going to have a lot more current, right? Going off the rails here. But I'm going to have a 10x increase, 10x increase in current when I do this. So the idea that the capacitance is changing when I change my scan rate, like it makes like the capacitance, I'm saying the capacitance should remain constant is at the end of the day what I'm trying to say. If you have a material, it shouldn't matter what the scan rate is. The capacitance should be constant because the capacitance is in somewhat an intrinsic property of your material of your situation. The current that you measure will absolutely change just based on this relationship. That the scan rate, that you get more current when you have these faster scan rates in your cyclic voltammograms. Absolutely, it absolutely should do that. But if you compare this with, say, the Randall-Sevcich equation, the Randall-Sevcich equation has to do with a homogeneous diffusion-controlled species. The current, the peak current associated with this Faradaic process has a square root of the scan rate dependence, but it's dependent on the area, the concentration, the number of electrons transferred, the diffusion coefficient. They have all these things that can even change based on temperature. But that current will also change due to the scan rate. So all I'm saying is that I wouldn't necessarily plot, because your mass also is the same during these experiments, right? So the mass is the same. The capacitance should be the same as you move from low to high scan rates. So just keep that in mind. Like, you may see more current as you increase the scan rate, but you don't necessarily need to report the scan rate. Like, there isn't a specific capacitance at a specific scan rate. There should be a different current associated with a specific scan rate, but the capacitance, the specific capacitance, should be the same. And generally speaking, I would say that I would have wanted to take your data and just done a linear extrapolation of it. Like, using these plots, I get current at different scan rates at one potential, and then they should form like a linear relationship. Do a linear extrapolation. The slope would give me the capacitance. And then you divide that by the mass, and then you get the capacitance, the specific capacitance, sort of say. All right, that's enough of that. So let me see. We have a question from Juan Zapta. I'm going to hopefully be able to answer your question, Juan. Let's see. Could you provide an explanation about the configuration for connecting a 4-electrode cell to conduct electrochemical impedance spectroscopy studies on membranes or viscous substances? Continues to say, the placement and function of each electrode compared to a 3-electrode cell. What happened to the working electrode in the 4-electrode cell? Okay, that's very good. I will let me show you something, Juan, that maybe hopefully this helps. Now give me 1 minute to pull up a presentation that I did some time ago. And when I say some time ago, I mean earlier this year. Let's go to... All right. So... Okay. Okay. All right. So So Juan, hopefully you can see this. This is, I'm gonna hide this, and I'm gonna see if I make this a little bit bigger, what happens if that, nope, I think that just goes completely away. Okay, can't do that. All right, so let me, and then I'll also, I'll move this bar over a little bit so it's a bit easier to see. Okay, Juan, so this is the potentiostat circuit. Okay, what I want to, I don't want to go too much into the details, but this will show you the 4 electrode configuration. That's the main question. There are actually 4 cell cable leads that you can connect. There's the counter electrode lead. This is the green one here. There's a reference electrode lead. There are 2 working electrode leads. There is a working sense lead and a working drive lead. And actually, we give them these titles, but really they're kind of equal and opposites in some kind of strange way. The counter electrode drives current through the cell. So current flows through the counter electrode and it goes to the working drive electrode. So these are 2 kind of current points or voltage points, so to say. They drive a voltage between them, which drives current from the counter to the working drive. So in your membrane, where the current flows is going to be between the counter and the working drive electrode. And in our case, the working drive is a red cell cable lead, and the counter is a green cell cable lead. Okay. Now, the reference electrode is here, and the working sense electrode is here. The reference electrode is a white lead, and the working sense is an orange lead. These are both measurement, kind of measurement leads. You can even see, to a degree, the reference and the working sense, the difference between them is measured here at a voltmeter. You can actually replace electrometer, in this case, with just like a digital voltmeter. I just put my 2 electrode leads here, and then I measure a voltage between them. So the voltage measurement is occurring between my reference and my working sense electrode. And in a traditional 3 electrode cell, as you asked, Juan, these 2 are typically shorted together. So the glassy carbon electrode, the gold electrode in your 3 electrode cell, whatever it may be, those 2 are shorted together. The current passes through the glassy carbon to the working drive, but the potential of that glassy carbon is measured at the working sense, and they're both connected to the same point. In a 4-point probe experiment, or in a membrane where you're trying to, and I don't do any membrane research, but in a membrane, you can put these in different locations such that the potential difference between, as current flows between the counter and working drive, the potential difference at different points in the membrane can be measured. And even if you want to specifically have current flow between only a certain path in the membrane, you could do that as well. You just put the counter and the working drive close to each other, or where, like, the 2 points in between is where the current's going to flow. The current is going to flow to the path through the path of least resistance to a source, and the working drive electrode's connected to ground, which is the source, so to say. So it has a place to go. The current isn't just going to go through the entire membrane and doing loops all over the place and then make it to the working drive. It's going to go straight from counter to working drive. So current flows through the counter to the working drive electrode, and where you place those 2 electrodes is where the current flows. The reference and the working sense is where the potential is measured between those 2 points. So you probably would want to make sure the reference and working sense is within the path of the counter to the working drive, but it doesn't have to be. You may want to measure the potential elsewhere. But that's fundamentally what the 4 electrodes represent. They represent the path for current to flow and the path for voltage to be measured. So hopefully, Juan, that kind of helps you a little bit with understanding the cell configuration in a 4-point experiment or a 4-point probe type of experiment. And you will want to determine, all right, what kind of experiment am I doing with studying this membrane? Where or what, how do I want to configure this? It will be your job to determine that. But based on my description, that is what you're doing when you connect these electrodes to different places on your membrane. Okay. All right. So stop screen sharing. So Juan, let me know if you have any further questions about that. There are definitely some weird EIS stuff that you'll run into when doing these kinds of experiments, but that is fundamentally what the electrodes represent on the cell cable leads. Okay, Shruti, I'm glad you're very welcome. I'm happy to discuss the paper. I don't want to like tear the paper apart, or it's a recently published paper. That was just my when I looked at the electrochemistry part, I assumed the synthesis is all very good. I'm not as much of an expert in material synthesis and characterization. It looks fine. But that was my thoughts about the electrochemistry. If you have further questions or further like discussion that you want me to have about it, I'm happy to do so. But that was just related to the calculation of the specific capacitance. I feel that the specific capacitance should be a stationary value with current and scan rate moving kind of proportionally to each other. And so the specific capacitance shouldn't change regardless if the scan rates change. There might be subtle deviations, but it should be the same. But that's all. I'm happy. Thank you for continuing to watch and support us. All right, so Bill, and also Juan says, thanks, great explanation. You're very welcome, and I'm happy to answer any more questions. Bill has a question. Can we judge on hydrogen adsorption desorption rate on a catalyst based on based on the currents obtained during the cathodic and anodic scan for the hydrogen evolution reaction? When sometimes the cathodic and anodic scans overlap and sometimes they do not. So this is a very good question. Let me think about this for just a minute. I think that there's absolutely some information. This is how I think about the kind of information you can get. Can you get rate information? In a way, yes. How? I'm not really 100% sure. There is something known as foot of the wave analysis. That's been characterized at least for diffusion controlled redox active species, where the concentration of your analyte in question. But the scan is important, but almost more importantly, I'm thinking about the potential. So Bill, let me just kind of walk you through what I'm thinking about. So let me just get rid of this. If I have, let's say if I'm doing hydrogen evolution, I am, let's say, actually my plot, I'll be working a little bit more in the third quadrant, sort of say. So I'm applying, so this is current, which is negative, going this way, and this is potential, which is negative, going this way. And so I start to see stuff like this, with hydrogen evolution. I'll use a different color for one of these. All right, so something like this.
something along these lines. So the current, sort of to say, can be constant at different levels, but the potential, if these are different catalysts, the potential with which you measure this current will be different. And that potential is the thing that's actually, in a way, kind of changing a bit more. That's when you're studying like hydrogen adsorption on some kind of material. The performance of your catalyst is somewhat dependent on what potential you are applying and how easy is the electron transfer that's occurring. The rate of adsorption, desorption. You can do, in a way, I think what you're looking at is the heterogeneous rate constant. You want to figure out what is your K naught. I think that's up here. It could be down here. Let me double check. Yeah, it's up there. So yeah, so this is the heterogeneous rate constant. That's what you really are after. Heterogeneous rate constant. Because this rate constant very much describes how easy the electron transfer is. So let me kind of describe it. Let me first just check to see if you have any. I used slow scan rate of 2 millivolts per centimeter cubed. Okay, all right. I think that's fine. I think you can use these slow scan rates. I think is fine. So the heterogeneous rate constant, if you have a reaction, of course you have to kind of know the reaction, but if you have, say, hydrogen evolution is complicated, but if you have like adsorbed hydrogen plus another adsorbed hydrogen, and then maybe you need like what, two electron transfers. I'm not so sure. Plus 2 electrons, 2 E minus, equilibrium with hydrogen, right? And this is gas, right? So you have this adsorbed hydrogen that's on the surface. It gains 2 electrons. This is just kind of the net reaction. The heterogeneous rate constant is a measure of how quickly or how easy this reaction moves back and forth. So platinum, for example, very easily it has a very fast, high heterogeneous rate constant for this particular reaction. Because it can take hydrogen gas and very easily convert it back into hydrogen or protons. This may be, it'd be better if I call this protons instead of adsorption, but adsorption is an intermediate in the way of this process. Yes, 2H plus 2 electrons gives you hydrogen gas. The rate constant for this reaction tells you how easy it is, and the ease by with which it can do it is based on kind of the overpotential. Like, it has a very low overpotential. It doesn't require this much extra voltage to get the current to the same spot. And that, in a way, is a measure of the rate of adsorption, desorption. But it's complicated because all the current that you measure in these CV experiments, even at 2 millivolts per second, you're usually looking at net current. You're looking at the net current reaction. So all the intermediate reactions, right, that are happening, like this is like the final one, you can't really get much information from it. It's not that all this is happening in one big concerted electron transfer to hydrogen gas. There's probably a couple single electron transfer steps to form adsorbed hydrogen that then combine and then form hydrogen gas, or maybe an adsorbed hydrogen plus an H plus in solution, then gains an electron to become hydrogen gas, and then there's some mass transport kinetics involved. But so all those reactions may be occurring. The specific adsorption, desorption stuff may be a little bit harder to tease out, but you can get some somewhat useful information just on doing these kinds of curves. And a lot of people will use things like a rotating disc electrode or a rotating ring disc electrode, mostly rotating disc, because you're able to control mass transport much more easily. Neil usually says you need to have if you're doing Kutek-Levitt analysis, you must be getting or if you're doing a Tafel plot, sorry, if you're doing a Tafel analysis, which this is kind of Tafel analysis, you need kinetic current. You can't have mass transport limited current in your system. You need to have, and that's why Kutek-Levitt is very powerful, and the rotating disk is very powerful, because there are ways of moving beyond the mass transport limitation in your system. So Bill, I hope that was kind of helpful or tells you some stuff, so you can judge a little bit on the rates based on I would say the voltage with which you get the same current for your different catalysts. So hopefully, Bill, that's helpful or gives you some information. Okay. All right. Let's see. So we don't have any more additional questions. Again, if you have something that you want to share with us, if you have questions, type them on the YouTube channel, or even email us questions. We're happy to kind of help as much as we possibly can. And I'm hoping that in the future we'll have some more webinars. I'm hoping to have more YouTube videos out, but we are working on a variety of different big projects. If you are going to the ECS Hawaii meeting, which is in a few weeks, definitely that's the next meeting that Neil will be at and Tim will be at. So if you are there, please stop by and say hello. We always appreciate people stopping by and saying hi. All right. Well, it looks like there's not too many questions right now. I guess with Neil out, I'm not as popular as Neil when it comes to these live streams. He's also very good at answering questions in a succinct manner. So I think with that said, I'll call it a day for the live stream. It's been a little bit busy, especially with Neil out, and a lot of things that's happening. If you haven't already done so, I would encourage you to check out Aftermath Live and continue to look at some of Pine Research for electrochemistry equipment. It's Neil and I. It's our job. This is how we pay the bills, so to say. So, and we try to do this to drive interest, to answer your questions, to help you guys out as much as possible. All right. Thank you all for tuning in, and we should have another live stream next week. Hopefully Neil's feeling better by then. All right. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.